scripture reading this morning is from Genesis 29, verse 31, to chapter 30, verse 6. When the Eternal One saw how Leah was unloved, he made her fertile, but Rachel remained barren. Leah conceived and gave birth to a son, and she named him Reuben. Leah said, "Because the Eternal One has been compassionate to me in my painful predicament, allowing me to bear this child, surely now my husband will love me." In time she conceived again and gave birth to another son. "Because the Eternal One has heard I am unloved, he has given me this son too." So Leah named this second son Simeon. Then she conceived for the third time and gave birth to her third son. She thought, "Surely now my husband will be more attracted to me, because I have given him 3 sons." Leah named the third son Levi. And once again she conceived and gave birth to her fourth son. "This time I will praise the Eternal One." So Leah named this son Judah. After Judah, Leah didn't have any more children for a while. When Rachel realized she couldn't have Jacob's children, she grew envious of her sister and complained to Jacob, "I'll just die if you don't give me children." Jacob became angry with Rachel. "Am I God? He's the one responsible for you not getting pregnant, not me." Rachel told him, "Here's my servant, Bilhah. Sleep with her so she can be a surrogate for me. I'll have my children through her." So she gave Jacob her servant Bilhah to be another one of his wives, and Jacob slept with her. Bilhah conceived and gave birth to Jacob's son. Rachel thought, "God has absolved me. He has heard my plea and has given me a son after all." So this is why Rachel named her son Dan.
And continuing on, verse 7. Rachel's servant Bilhah soon conceived again and gave birth to a second son for Jacob. "I've had to wrestle with my own sister as I've wrestled with God, but I have prevailed." So Rachel named this son Naphtali. When it seemed Leah was not going to have any more children, she took her servant Zilpah and gave her to Jacob to be a wife as well. So Leah's servant Zilpah gave birth to a son for Jacob. Leah said, "Good fortune has arrived." This is why she named him Gad. Then Leah's servant Zilpah gave birth to a second son for Jacob. Leah named him Asher to express her joy. "I'm so happy. All of the women can see how happy I am." When it came time to harvest the wheat, Reuben went out and found some mandrakes in the field and brought them to his mother Leah. Rachel heard about this and approached her sister. "Would you please give me some of the mandrakes your son found? You know it's no small matter. You've stolen the attentions of my husband. Now you want my son's mandrakes too?" Tell you what, Jacob can sleep with you tonight in exchange for some of your son's mandrakes. So, when Jacob came from the field in the evening, Leah went out to meet him. "Tonight you must sleep with me because I have hired you for a good price, some of my son's mandrakes." So, he slept with her that night. God listened to Leah and showed her his favor, and after many years, she again conceived and gave birth to her 5th son for Jacob. "God has paid me my wages since I gave my servant to my husband." This is why she named her son Issachar. And God's favor didn't stop with him. Leah conceived again and gave birth to a 6th son for Jacob. "God has given me a plentiful gift. Now my husband will surely honor me, because I have given him 6 sons. This is why she named her 6th son Zebulun. And at last, after that, she gave birth to a daughter and named her Dinah. Then God remembered Rachel. He heard her prayer and made her fertile. She conceived and gave birth to her first son. God has taken away my shame. She decided to name him Joseph. Then Rachel asked, "May the Eternal One add to me another son." This is the word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
Every Sunday morning. I have a very important decision that I have to make. What am I going to wear? Now, I don't stress about this as much as perhaps some of the ladies do, but it's still important, right? I want to look a certain way, and, you know, I have to pay attention to holidays and things. And so this morning, we went with black shoes, black pants, black jacket, white tie, and, of course, green for St. Patrick's Day. The tie is not just white, but it's a patterned white, and I like this tie. It suits me. It's classy yet stylish. And incredibly humble. Anyways, we are going to be in Genesis, and how many people knew that? Awesome. Good. You're paying attention. Genesis 29 and 30 is where we're going to be at today. So if you have a Bible, I encourage you to go to Genesis chapter 29 first, towards the end there. Now, we have been in Genesis for a little while, and we've been looking recently at a man named Abraham and his generations that followed. Now, Abraham had a son, his name was Isaac. Isaac had two sons, they were Jacob and Esau. Jacob was the preferred, the promised son. Jacob, you'll remember, came from an interesting background in his family. It was full of favoritism. It was full of deception and trickery and scheming. And Jacob left all of that because it was dangerous. It was bad. And he went back to his grandpa's homeland. And he went looking for a wife. He found one that he really liked. And if you remember, he got more than he bargained for. Jacob ended up with two wives, one named Leah. Everybody say Leah.
Leah.
And one named Rachel. Everybody say Rachel.
Rachel.
Say Rachel one more time.
Rachel.
Okay. Now, Leah and Rachel were Jacob's two wives. Now, Jacob, like I said, had a difficult upbringing. You'll remember his older brother came in one day, starving. Jacob, Jacob, you gotta feed me. You'll remember Jacob traded Esau a bowl of soup for Esau's birthright as the firstborn son. Years later, Isaac, Jacob's dad, told his favorite son Esau to go out and make a meal for Isaac so that Isaac could bless him. Carry on the promise of God that came through Abraham down through Esau's family. Esau leaves, Jacob finds out, and he tricks his dad into thinking that Jacob is Esau. And Isaac blesses this Esau imposter. Jacob gets away with it. Now, after this, Jacob meets God. You'll remember he falls asleep in the desert, and he has this incredible dream with angels going up and down a staircase. You remember this? Nod if you're... Yeah. And so Jacob's life seems to turn around. And he realizes how destructive, how devastating, how stressful that family situation that he came from was. So surely, he would not allow this same sort of competitive favoritism go on in his own family, would he? Genesis chapter 29 is where we're at. And it says in verse 31 of chapter 29, when the Lord saw that Leah was not loved, he opened her womb, but Rachel was barren. Leah became pregnant and gave birth to a son. She named him Reuben, for she said, it is because the Lord has seen my misery. And then she says, surely my husband will love me now. Surely my husband will love me now. Remember, Jacob was in love with Rachel. Leah was the other sister. She had weak eyes. In that culture, she just wasn't as attractive as Rachel was. And so Jacob was tricked into marrying Leah, but he didn't love her. And Leah was forced by her father to be married to this man that she didn't love. Imagine being in Leah's shoes. A loveless marriage that neither one of you wants to be in, but you're forced to stay. How do you make it work? And not only are you forced to share your husband with another woman, but the other woman is your sister. When God sees that Leah is not loved, he opens her womb and gives her a child. And she says, "Oh good, the Lord has heard me, but my main concern is my husband. Surely he will love me now." Losing yourself for someone else will leave you lost. Losing yourself for someone else will leave you lost. Gary, I have a question. Which of these ties do you prefer? Right here? This one? This one? I like this one too. Now Gary's a good guy. He takes care of our flowers and things. And I like Gary. And so I want to make sure that I do good by Gary. Okay, do you have a preference here, ties? We have another side too, if that helps. The pink and gray one right here. I wore this the other week, yeah. So good. Okay. Now Kay signs my checks. So we definitely want to make sure she's happy. The funny thing is that whenever you try and impress everybody, I forgot how to tie. When you try and impress everybody, it can be very restricting, right? Never done two at the same time before. There. Now, everybody's happy. Sometimes, if you try to make everybody happy, it can choke the life out of you. Sometimes. So Leah, everybody say Leah.
Leah.
Leah has not one, not two, but 3 children before there's a period of stopping. So apparently, Jacob is still fulfilling his husbandly duties to his wife Leah. But there's no love there. Leah has 3 children, and each time it's, "Surely my husband will love me now." Do you love me now? How about now? If I do this, do you love me now? Again, again, again. And Rachel isn't having any children at this point. Everybody say Rachel.
Rachel.
Rachel isn't having any children. She's barren. And so what she does is she yells at Jacob, "What are you doing? Why? You need to give me children or I'll die." Because he has some control over that. And Jacob is on the defensive. Talk to him. He's the one responsible. And then she does something brilliant. She says, "I have an idea, never been done before. Why don't you sleep with my servant? Take her as another wife, wife number 3, and I will have children through her." Okay. So Jacob sleeps with Rachel's servant. She has a couple kids. And Rachel, "Aha! I have beaten my sister." Leah sees, oh, Rachel gave her maidservant. Jacob, come sleep with this woman. She's my servant, and she'll give me more kids, so you sleep with her." "Okay, dear." Jacob is up to 4 wives now, somewhere around, I don't know, I lost track, 8 kids, something like that. Trying to make everybody It's very familiar, isn't it? Do you remember not so long ago there was a man named Abraham, married to a woman named Sarah. Sarah couldn't have children, and so she took her maidservant. Do you remember her name? Hagar. And she gave her to Abraham and said, Abraham, sleep with her. This will be no big deal. And it ends up being a big, big deal. A lot of trouble. Trying to make everybody happy. But Jacob does it. And you feel this back and forth tension, don't you? Between the two sisters. Leah, who is unloved. Rachel, who always wants to be the center of attention. Leah says, no, here, sleep with me, love me now. And Rachel says, no, sleep with my servant, love me now. And Leah says, no, sleep with my servant and love me more. Back and forth and back and forth. And then, Rachel sees Leah's first son, Reuben, go out to the fields, and he comes back with some mandrakes. Has anybody ever eaten mandrakes? Yeah, I thought so. Now, a mandrake is a type of fruit, okay? And it was thought, and still kind of, debated, that mandrakes served as an aphrodisiac, that they increased fertility. And so Rachel sees Reuben come in with this magical fruit, and she says, wait, can I have that? She's got to talk it over with Leah. Leah, your son, he brought in this fruit, and I'm having some trouble getting pregnant. I really, really want that fruit. Can you let me have the fruit? No. Well, I tell you what. You can sleep with Jacob tonight in exchange for this fruit. Okay. Something incredibly important traded away for something trivial. Something that they had fought over, that Jacob had worked 7 years, 14 years for. Handed away for a bowl of fruit. Rachel was so distracted by trying to outdo her sister that she gave up what was most important. Sounds awfully familiar, doesn't it? Esau gives up the power and the blessing and the promise that God had made to Abraham for a bowl of soup. And so Leah approaches Jacob as he's coming home. Jake? Yeah. Your wife sold your services to me tonight for some fruit. Okay, dear. You've got to sleep with me tonight. Now, there are certain things that we hold as important in our lives, right? Family, friends, church, ideals. And we never, ever give them up or compromise them or sacrifice them for something that doesn't really matter. Do we? What once was important, now just a casualty of competition. You guys are all too aware of this. We go to school, right? And we try to fit in. We come into junior high, we come into high school, and we want to do whatever we can to impress everybody. Because if you're not at the top, you're at the bottom. That's what we're told. If you're different, if you stick out, that's bad. That's what we're told. And so we try to fit into the right cliques, and we try to fit into the right groups just so that everybody will like us. We give up, we sacrifice things that are most important. Sometimes, and I don't know that this happens here, but sometimes you have parents who push their kids into things. Johnny, you need to go play sports. Susie, you need to go to this school. And it's not what the person has been wired to do. I am not a football player. It just doesn't work. I throw, win. I catch. I don't really run, but you know. That's not my passion. That's not what I've been wired to do. But sometimes we get this idea that the way that God wired us just wasn't good enough. Because what these other people think, that's far more important. And then we get out of school. And we enter into the single life. Oh, the single life. Where everybody tells the truth. Yeah. I did work with NASA for a few years. The very first launch to the moon, my idea. I was born in 1954. Yeah, that's how that all works out. Money? I've got loads of money. So much money. I bathe in money all the time, like Scrooge McDuck. I'm glad somebody laughed at that. We say, we compromise, all sorts of things when we're single, just to impress this other person. And now our divorce rate is skyrocketing out of control because when people get married, they realize this isn't the person I thought it was. See, it might seem like a good idea on the front end. Let me be somebody else. Let me impress you. Let me show you how I can be more than I actually am. And the reality is that doesn't work. In fact, it's actually quite harmful. And the person doesn't really want you to be fake anyway. And then we get married. We get married. And, marriage is great. Because then, when you get married, you can completely lose yourself. It's fantastic. You become completely subject to the other person, right? Some people have this idea that when you get married, you are supposed to forget everything about yourself. That the things that you once enjoyed doing, you should just get rid of those. You're supposed to fit a mold. There are roles and responsibilities that you're supposed to take care of. And again, divorce rates are skyrocketing. The person that they dated and the person they got engaged to is now not the person they're married to. It's incredibly important. Marriage is not a dependence on each other. It's an intra-dependence. It's two people coming together, but still they are one and separate. It's a reflection of God's relationship, an echo of the divine, if you will. But then comes retirement. We've worked, done all these things, and I don't know how many retired folks come to the twilight years of their life and they realize, what am I supposed to do now? I've retired, but my identity was so wrapped up in my work that I have no idea what I'm supposed to do now. Or people who have been married for years and years and years and years and years. They lost track of themselves. They lost track of who God wired them to be. And when that other person is gone, they don't know how to function. See, God made you very special. If you don't believe me, check your fingerprints. God made you you and not you anybody else. Nobody else can be you. And God likes it that way. Because only you can do what you do in God's kingdom. And He needs you to be you, and not for you to be somebody else. Because if you aren't you, then your job is going to be undone. Somehow, we have to maintain who we are in God's kingdom. See, Leah and Rachel lost track of this. They lost track of what was important, of what was so vital. They were all so concerned about getting married to Jacob. But when it came time to grow the family, that relationship wasn't good enough anymore. And when God chose to bless other people differently, they started sacrificing things, trying to outdo each other, trying to be one step ahead of everybody else. Now, the great part is the church never does any of this. Note the heavy sarcasm. Churches find themselves at conferences and in classes, and they see a program or a something that looks really flashy, and oh, this worked for us, so it'll work for you. And so they take these ideas home. Okay, yes, I've got it. This church that I was just at, they had this huge light show, and there was smoke, and there was fire, and there was like monkeys on bicycles, and it was the best thing that I've ever seen in a church service. We've got to do that here. And so churches invest thousands of dollars in light shows and smoke and monkeys just to find out that, oh yeah, that's right, everybody in the congregation has asthma. See, when you lose track of the goal, when you get caught up in the fads, when you get caught up in trying to impress and be like everybody else, you find yourself lost. Church is just as guilty of this as everybody else. And we need to stop. God once spoke to a man named Moses. Everybody say Moses?
Moses.
And Moses said, God, when the people ask me who I talk to, what do you want me to say? What do you want me to tell? Who do you want me to tell them sent me? And God spoke His name. His name, I am that I am. See, the very essence of who God is. Steady. Consistent. God knows who He is. His identity is set. And He's not going to waver or change that just to impress a group of people that don't really like Him. Jesus, in His life, was quoted saying again and again and again, I am the vine. I am the bread of life. I am the good shepherd. I am the way, the truth, and the life. Jesus knew who he was. His identity was wrapped up in who God said that he was. And he wasn't about to change that just to impress some people who don't really care. That's why this church, we are committed to growing and giving and love. That's who we are. That's who the church has always been. The truth stays the same year after year after year. The presentation changes. You've got to focus on what's most important. You are constantly changing, constantly evolving, but it's with integrity. And it's in God's time. God's will. Now maybe some of these things are the right things to do, but they've just been done at the wrong time or in the wrong way, or maybe more importantly, for the wrong reasons. How many times do we do something and we tell God to bless it afterwards? We don't ask him what he's already doing. Ask him what he wants to do through us, through who we are. Rachel in Genesis. Year after year after year, try and try as she may, it just doesn't happen for her. Even the magical mandrakes don't work. But then it says, finally, God heard Rachel's prayer. God heard Rachel's prayer. There comes a point when Rachel says, that's it. It's not working for me. This whole thing is just a mess. It's choking the life out of me. God, I need help. Do it your way in your time. Through the way that you've made me. My joys, my sorrows, my passions, my talents, my faults. God hears Rachel's prayer and she becomes pregnant with a son, the promised son, and she names him Joseph. And did you catch the last line? Rachel finally gets pregnant after years and years of this competition. She finally gets pregnant. And she thanks God, but she says, give me more. Now, I'm not here to say that change is bad, okay? I have worn all of these ties. They work. Not necessarily with this particular outfit, but they work. Change isn't bad, but if change is not birthed out of love, it will leave you lost. If you are just changing so that somebody else will love you, you will find yourself very upset somewhere down the road. But if change is because of love, that gives you direction. That gives you purpose. If my wife doesn't like the way that I do dishes, because I love her, I'm going to do them different. Not because I want her love. Do you see the difference? We come to God and we say, God, I'm going to change for you. I'm not going to do those sins anymore. I am going to be obedient. I'm going to pray every day. I'm going to read through the book of Genesis 800 times before the end of the year. I'm going to do all of these things for you. And that's going to be great. And then surely you will love me. And it doesn't work. And we give it up. And we find ourselves burnt out. But how different it is when we realize that God loves us unconditionally. God loves you unconditionally. God loves you unconditionally. No matter if you read through the Bible 1,000,000 times in your life, God still loves you unconditionally. No matter if you make all the mistakes that your parents told you not to make, God still loves you unconditionally. Even if on Easter Sunday you bring 100 people to church, God still loves you unconditionally. And even if you, in your own private conversations, badmouth God's church, God still loves you unconditionally. That type of love, that is worth changing for. So, if you want some application, ask yourself these questions. What am I motivated by? Why do I do what I do? Maybe you need to ask yourself, where did I lose myself? Do I need to get back in touch with who God has made me to be? And some of you might be to the point where you just want to know, what do I do now? The first thing you can do is pray about it. Ask God, God, who do you want me to be? I enjoy doing this, I don't enjoy doing this. I feel upset when this happens. I feel overjoyed when this happens. God, help me to figure out, help me to discern my life and your will for me. Pray about it. Have honest conversations. Mom, Dad, I am not a football player. It hurts. That's just not me. Honey, you ask me to do this time and time and time and time and time again, and I just help me to figure out a better way to do it. Have honest conversations. And the last thing to do is to change. Because change isn't bad. And when it's birthed out of love, it gives you direction. And if you allow yourself to change, God will take who you are, what you like, the way that you've been wired, and He'll make it right. The way it's supposed to be. Change not to gain love, but because of it. Let me pray. God, I thank you for today. I thank you for the way that you love us. For the way that you help us to change. Even though sometimes it may not make sense, it may not be what we want to do, it may be uncomfortable. But God, if we come from it, from the place where we realize that you love us unconditionally, so much so that you're willing to die for us, Father, that makes any change possible. Help us not to change just because people want us to. Help us change because it's the right thing to do. Father, I thank you for these folks, and I pray you will continue to echo in their minds this truth, that you love them unconditionally. And it's in your Son's name that we pray.